Hello, friends. Thanks for joining the Verdin Law Firm podcast. On today's episode, the theme that we will discuss will be why are Canadians investing in Texas? But before we get into the subject matter, let me tell you just a little bit about myself. So my name is Verdin. I have been practicing law for over 24 years, and I am board certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization in the area of immigration and nationality law. All right, so let's get to it. Why are Canadians investing in Texas? So this question is very interesting because I love seeing the patterns of my clients, of our firm's clients, and I like to see where they're coming from, for what reasons, where they're settling. So I like to analyze these trend lines, and I always find it very, very curious. I find curious insights by studying the statistics that the government produces on these metrics. So let's kind of just chat big picture, first of all, a little bit about the E-2 visa. So just as a reminder, for those of you who are not familiar with the E-2 visa, the E-2 visa is a non-immigrant visa that foreign nationals wanting to come to the United States can seek it and obtain it if they're coming to the United States to develop and direct an investment, an enterprise through an investment, and they're coming to grow their business, a business that is a franchise or a startup or acquiring an existing company. And they're coming for that purpose. So we know that it's a popular visa for Canadians to seek. And we know that because when we compare all of the countries that are seeking it, the E-2 visa, Canada, at least for the year 2023, was in the top 3 recipients of the E-2 visa worldwide. Specifically in 2023, we saw that about 6,200 visas were issued to Canadians seeking the E-2 visa. And just for a reference point, the E-2 visa worldwide in 2023 had a 91% approval rate. So out of all the applications worldwide, 91% were approved. Okay, so once an individual obtains the E-2 visa, they really, while they're deciding to obtain it, they start considering where they want to settle in the U.S. And as a reminder, also, the United States has 50 states and lots of different cultural, kind of subcultural environments within the country. Lots of differences throughout the country. So the U.S. is not the same throughout the country. It varies a lot from geographic area to geographic area. So the question then becomes, where does the Canadian want to settle? So if a Canadian wants to come to the U.S., where do they want to settle? So historically, we've seen 3 states rise to the top as to the most common states of destination where the E-2 national will settle. So the top 3 states where E-2 visa holders will settle are California, Texas, and Florida. California, Texas, and Florida. So in today's podcast, I'm gonna compare these states to each other, and kind of their similarities, and then contrast them on their differences. And that way, the E-2 visa holder can make some informed decisions as to where they end up settling. So let's break it down. So what are some of the common variables? And in today's podcast, we're going to discuss economics, we're going to discuss laws and regulations, and the weather. So let's tackle each factor, and we'll start off with economics. So this is I'm starting off with economics because it's the most common reason people decide to get the E-2 visa. At the end of the day, they're seeking it to better their economic standing. They're looking to diversify their assets, their investments throughout the world, and they're just coming to be in a better financial position. So it's important to analyze the economics of these different states. All right, so let's get into the economics. So one key factor that is important to contrast here is the issue of state income tax. So in the U.S., not every state has the same income tax structure at the state level. So the government, each state government has the authority to implement its own tax structure, tax regime, and some states decide to incorporate a state income tax and to tax individual residents of that state's income, and some states do not tax the income. So when we compare these three states, we see that California has a state income tax, but Texas and Florida do not. So California has a very high income compared to the states that tax the income. They actually have a high level of state income tax. But Texas and Florida do not tax individuals' incomes for individuals that live in that state. So that's an important factor for individuals that are looking to settle in one of those three states. Now, another variable within the economics is the housing cost. So as we all know, the housing line item at the family budget is usually high. It's one of the higher taking up a big percentage of the household's income. So it's an important line item to compare. Now, again, when we look at these three states, California has the highest housing cost and probably in the country at this point, but at least compared to those three states, it has very high rents in California has high rents, and it also has high price of real estate to purchase the real estate. So, and Texas, on the other hand, has the least expensive housing out of those three states. Florida falls somewhere in the middle of those three states. So we have California having the most expensive housing, and Florida coming after that, and then Texas the most affordable housing out of those three states. Another variable on the economics would be transportation. Let's look at, for example, the cost of gasoline. In the U.S., gas prices vary a lot from state to state, and California has the most expensive gasoline out of those three states. And if not in the country, consistently, gas is very, very expensive because the state taxes the gasoline and the oil industry and the gas industry a lot there. So the companies will pass on those costs to the residents of that state. And that's one of the reasons also in terms of the economics for the producers, in this case, the oil and gas producers in Texas. We have a lot of presence of that industry. So because of the proximity and the state, the producers are not taxed as heavily. They pass out some of those savings to the Texas residents. So California has the most expensive gasoline out of those three, and Texas has the least expensive. Again, Florida falling somewhere in the middle. All right, so you see a pattern in terms of the economics. Overall, cost of living is the highest in California, and in Texas, it's the least. It's the most affordable in terms of cost of living. All right, let's look at another factor, laws and regulations. So when we compare California, Texas, and Florida, let's consider that politics is a force to consider in the laws and regulations of the states, because what we've seen is that traditionally Texas and Florida are Republican states, and California has traditionally been a Democratic state. So the Democratic Party tends to have more presence and popularity in that state. And in contrast, in Texas and Florida are generally Republicans. So Republicans historically have been a little bit more pro-business, more conservative. That means that they want less government involvement in industry, and they want the market to have more of a say in the daily, day-to-day operations of industry. So, when somebody's starting a business, there's going to be less licensing and permitting restrictions in the state of Texas and Florida compared to California. Again, every industry and every business model could have its own requirements, so it's important for an individual to do their due diligence on the specifics of that business model, to identify what permitting is required, what licenses are required for their specific business. But as a whole, California has more restrictions compared to Texas and Florida. All right, the last factor I want to look at, and I would be remiss if I just neglected this factor, and it's the weather, because really it is a driving factor for a lot of Canadians to desire to come to the U.S. because they want to escape that cold climate that is up there. And I have visited Canada, and it is very, very cold some parts of the year. So I don't blame our Canadian friends to wanting to spend some time here in some warmer states. And here is where I think California has the ideal weather compared to the 3 states. My preference in the weather, I would say California has some of the nicest weather in the country. Very temperate year-round. Doesn't get super cold, doesn't get super hot. It's just overall nice, comfortable climate. Texas and Florida, not as temperate as California, in my opinion. The summers in Texas get quite hot. And in the winter, it can get cold. It's not crazy cold, but it can get a little bit cold. But Florida beaches are very nice and beautiful, and I enjoy spending time in Florida, but it is a little bit more humid than Texas. So yeah, depending on your weather preferences, and if economics are not really a factor for you, but weather is a driving force, then California would have the best. That would be an ideal scenario and very attractive scenario for our Canadian friends. So these are the factors that I see are at the top of mind for a lot of our Canadian friends. I'll repeat them: economics, the laws and regulations, and the weather. And as you can see, there's pros and cons to each of these states. But at the end of the day, most people tend to lean on the economics factor, and that's where Texas usually takes the top position because of the lack of state income tax, lower housing costs, and lower transportation costs. All right. Well, I hope you found this information helpful as you do your own research, your own due diligence. And I really am excited for you as you consider the E2 visa. If you have questions, please do not hesitate to contact an immigration lawyer that focuses and does a lot of E2 visas. That way you can get the assistance of a professional to guide you through your analysis. All right. It's been a pleasure. Good day to you.